Your liberal arts degree is worthless in the real world, Sarah. You're just wasting Dad's money, Michael sneered across our parents' Thanksgiving table, the smell of turkey and stuffing hanging in the air between us. His words stung more than usual this year, perhaps because at 35, I was tired of defending my choices to my investment banker brother who measured everyone's worth by the size of their paycheck. I gripped my wine glass tighter as Mom shot me a sympathetic glance. Dad kept his eyes on his plate, avoiding the familiar battlefield that our holiday gatherings had become. My brother's wife, Melissa, stared out the window, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict her husband. My philosophy degree taught me to think, Michael. Something an MBA clearly doesn't cover, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the familiar heat rising in my cheeks. Michael laughed, the sound echoing off the dining room walls. Thinking doesn't pay the bills, sis. While you've been thinking for the past decade, I've built a career. Regional director by 35 corner office and stock options that are worth more than your annual salary. He took a smug sip of his bourbon. But hey, at least you can quote Nietzsche while you figure out how to make rent this month. Mom intervened, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness. Who wants pumpkin pie? I tried a new recipe this year. But Michael wasn't finished. He never knew when to stop. Seriously though, Sarah, your little tech startup is cute, but you're competing with real companies with serious backing. It's like watching a kid with a lemonade stand thinking they're going to take on Coca-Cola. I thought about the acquisition papers sitting in my email inbox, waiting for digital signatures. The months of secret negotiations, the sleepless nights, the validation finally within reach. But I wasn't ready to share the news yet, not even to shut my brother up. Some victories needed to be savored privately before being served up to people who hadn't believed in you. We're doing fine, actually, I said, forcing a smile. But I'd love to hear more about those stock options you're so proud of. 10 years earlier, I had sat in my college advisor's office, fighting back tears as she gently suggested I consider changing my major. Philosophy is fascinating, Sarah, but have you thought about something more practical? Her concern seemed genuine, but all I heard was another voice telling me I wasn't making the right choices. I'd chosen philosophy because it challenged me, because the questions it posed had no easy answers, because it taught me to examine problems from angles others might miss. And when I discovered my passion for technology during a required computer science elective my junior year, I didn't abandon philosophy. I found the intersection where both could thrive. My parents had been cautiously supportive, though I could see the worry in their eyes when my first jobs out of college paid barely enough to cover my small apartment and student loans. Michael, 7 years my senior and already climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious financial firm, never missed an opportunity to highlight the gap between our bank accounts and career trajectories. You know what they say, he would quip at family gatherings. Philosophy majors ask why. Computer science majors ask how. Business majors ask when. And MBAs like me ask how much. After 5 years of working for other people's startups, watching my ideas make others wealthy while I remained firmly in the middle-class trenches, I decided to launch my own company. EthiTech started small, just me and 2 former colleagues working out of my apartment, developing software that helped companies analyze ethical implications of their automated decision systems. Ethics in tech? That's your big idea. Michael had laughed when I told the family. Good luck finding investors for that unicorn. My parents had offered to help financially, but I refused. This was my vision, my risk to take. Instead, I maxed out credit cards, took a second mortgage on my small condo, and lived on ramen and determination for the first 18 months. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A major healthcare company faced public backlash when their patient prioritization algorithm was found to disadvantage certain demographic groups. Their CEO happened to read an article where I was quoted about algorithmic bias. 3 weeks later, we had our first major client. From there, Growth was steady but challenging. For every success, there were a dozen setbacks. I learned to pitch to rooms full of skeptical investors who couldn't quite grasp why companies would pay for what we offered, until regulatory changes and public opinion shifted the landscape, making ethical AI not just a nice-to-have but a business imperative. By year 3, we had 15 employees. By year 5, over 50. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies and government agencies. But profitability remained elusive as we continually reinvested in research and development. On paper, I still looked like Michael's struggling little sister with the impractical degree. "Pass the gravy, please," Dad said, his quiet voice breaking my reverie. I handed him the boat, our fingers brushing in a moment of silent understanding. Dad had never been one for confrontation, but he'd slipped me a check when I started Ethitech, with a note that said simply, "I believe in you." Melissa, perhaps sensing the tension needed diffusing, turned to me with genuine interest. "How are things really going with your company, Sarah? Last time we talked, you mentioned something about a new approach to privacy protection." Before I could answer, Michael interjected, "God, not shop talk at dinner. Nobody wants to hear about data privacy while they're trying to digest turkey." "Actually," Mom said with uncharacteristic sharpness, "I'd love to hear about Sarah's work." Michael rolled his eyes but fell silent, stabbing at his mashed potatoes with unnecessary force. I smiled gratefully at my mother. "We've developed a framework that helps companies protect user privacy while still getting the data insights they need. It's been getting a lot of attention lately." I deliberately kept it vague, not mentioning that this attention included acquisition talks with several major tech firms, including Calypso Corp, the tech giant that had recently purchased the financial software division where Michael worked. "That sounds fascinating," Melissa said, and I could tell she meant it. I'd always suspected she was smarter than my brother gave her credit for. "It's honestly not that complicated," I explained. "Most companies treat privacy as an afterthought, something to address only when regulations force them to. We've developed tools that build privacy protection into the foundation of their systems, which actually saves them money in the long run." Michael snorted. "Until someone builds the same thing for half the price in Bangalore." "Not everything is about cost, Michael," I replied evenly. "Some things are about doing the right thing. And that, dear sister, is why you'll always be a small fish. Business isn't a philosophy seminar. It's about numbers, market share, and beating the competition." He raised his glass as if toasting his own wisdom. "The company that bought our division last month? They understand that. They paid a premium for us because we deliver results, not theoretical ethics discussions." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to tell him exactly who had purchased his division and why. Instead, I asked innocently, "How is the transition going with the new owners? Calypso Corp, right?" Michael's expression shifted subtly. "It's fine. They're conducting a full review of all departments, standard procedure. Nothing for me to worry about. My division's numbers speak for themselves." What he didn't know was that Calypso Corp had purchased his company's financial software division primarily to acquire Ethitech, my company. The financial division was considered an asset they'd likely restructure or sell off within a year. But that information wasn't public yet. The final contracts would be signed Monday morning. "I'm sure you'll be fine," I said, meaning it more than he knew. We had no plans to clean house entirely, though significant leadership changes were inevitable. Whether Michael would be among those remaining depended entirely on the assessment of his department's ethical practices, an evaluation my team would help conduct. The irony was almost too perfect. My worthless philosophy degree had taught me to build systems that examined the ethical implications of financial algorithms, like the ones my brother's team developed. Now, those same ethical frameworks would be used to evaluate his work. "More wine, anyone?" Dad offered, trying once again to steer us toward calmer waters. I passed my glass, thinking about the meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. Michael would be there, along with his entire leadership team. He would discover that his little sister with the worthless philosophy degree was now essentially his boss. But tonight wasn't the time for that revelation. Tonight was for family, for breathing through the familiar frustrations, for remembering that success comes in many forms, including the sweet, private knowledge that vindication was just days away. "So, Michael," Mom asked, "will you and Melissa be hosting Christmas this year? Your new house should be ready by then, right?" As Michael launched into details about their custom-built suburban mansion, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Discreetly checking it under the table, I saw an email from Calypso Corp's CEO. Last details confirmed. "We announce Tuesday. Looking forward to welcoming you to the leadership team." I smiled to myself and returned to my turkey. Some things were worth waiting for. Later, as we helped clear the dishes, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "You seem different today," she observed, handing me a plate to dry. "More at peace with Michael's needling." I shrugged. "Maybe I'm finally growing up." "Or maybe," she said with a knowing look, "there's something you're not telling us." I considered confiding in her, but the timing wasn't right. Tuesday's revelation would be sweeter if it came as a complete surprise. "Just grateful for what I have, Mom. Business is good. Life is good." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I'm proud of you, you know. Following your own path isn't easy, especially with your brother casting such a long shadow." "Thanks, Mom," I said, giving her a quick hug. "That means a lot." As I dried the last dish, I heard Michael in the living room, his voice carrying as he explained to Dad how his division would be even more valuable after the acquisition. "The CEO basically told me I'm central to their plans going forward," he boasted. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. The weekend passed slowly. I spent most of it reviewing documentation and preparing for the week ahead. By Monday morning, my anticipation had turned to nervous energy. I arrived at the office early, greeted by Aisha, my chief operating officer and the first person I'd hired when Tech began to grow. "Ready for the big day tomorrow?" she asked, handing me a coffee. "More than ready," I replied, though I'm not looking forward to the corporate politics that come with being part of a larger organization. Aisha laughed. Says the woman who navigated us through 3 rounds of venture funding and turned down 2 previous acquisition offers. "You're better at politics than you admit." "Different kind of politics," I said. "Family politics are the worst." She raised an eyebrow. "Is this about your brother? The one who works for—" "Yep," I confirmed. "The very same, and he has no idea." "Oh, to be a fly on the wall tomorrow," Aisha said with a grin. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of final preparations and last-minute details. By evening, everything was set. The contracts were signed, the press release drafted, and the announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. Tuesday, followed by an all-hands meeting where the leadership of both companies would be introduced. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with all the possible ways tomorrow could unfold. Part of me felt childish for looking forward to Michael's reaction. Shouldn't I be above such petty satisfaction? But another part recognized this as the culmination of years of dismissal and condescension, not just from Michael, but from everyone who'd ever suggested that my education, my approach, my vision had less value because it didn't fit their definition of success. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit that projected authority without flashiness, added my mother's pearl earrings for luck, and headed to Calypso Corp's gleaming headquarters. John Chin, Calypso Corp CEO, met me in the lobby. "Sarah," the woman of the hour. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Ready to make history?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, matching his enthusiasm. "The acquisition announcement just went live," he said, checking his phone. "Your company is now officially part of ours, though, as we've discussed, Tech will maintain significant autonomy." We rode the elevator to the executive floor, where the leadership team was gathering before the all-hands meeting. As the doors opened, I caught sight of Michael at the far end of the conference room, huddled with several other executives, his back to me. John placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let me introduce you around before we start." One by one, I met the C-suite executives who would now be my colleagues. Each greeting was warm, respectful, many expressing genuine excitement about what EthiTech would bring to their organization. Finally, John guided me toward the group where Michael stood. "And here's our financial solutions division leadership. You'll be working closely with them on integration of your ethical framework." Michael turned, his expression shifting from professional attentiveness to utter shock as he recognized me. The coffee cup in his hand tilted dangerously. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. John, unaware of our connection, made the formal introduction. "This is Sarah Wilson, founder and CEO of EthiTech, which as of this morning is our newest and most exciting acquisition. Sarah's team has developed the ethical AI frameworks that will become central to all our products going forward, including your division's trading platforms." I extended my hand professionally. "Hello, Michael. Looks like we'll be working together." The color drained from his face as the implications sank in. Around us, his colleagues watched with interest, clearly sensing an unexpected dynamic. "You two know each other?" John asked, looking between us. "Yes," I said with a smile. "Michael is my brother, actually." John's eyebrows shot up. "Your brother? You never mentioned." "It never seemed relevant to our business discussions," I said smoothly, "though I'm sure Michael's insight will be valuable as we integrate our systems." Michael finally found his voice. "I didn't know EthiTech was being acquired by Calypso Corp." "It's been kept quite confidential," John explained. "Only senior leadership was aware. Sarah's company will lead our new ethical technology division, reporting directly to me." He checked his watch. "We should head downstairs. The all-hands meeting starts in 10 minutes. As John moved away to speak with another executive, Michael leaned closer to me, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "About the acquisition?" "Several months." "About the timing coinciding with your division's acquisition?" "That was just a happy coincidence." He shook his head slowly. "So at Thanksgiving, when I was talking about my worthless degree and cute little startup?" I finished for him. Yes, I already knew. Sometimes life has a wonderful sense of irony, doesn't it? Before he could respond, John called for everyone's attention. "Let's head downstairs, folks. Big day ahead." As we filed toward the elevators, I felt Michael's eyes on me. I'd imagined this moment for weeks, pictured his shock and discomfort. But now that it was here, I felt strangely hollow. This wasn't just about proving him wrong or enjoying a moment of vindication. This was about the years of work, the risks taken, the vision pursued when few others could see it. In the elevator, Michael moved beside me. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "I mean it." I looked at him, searching for the sarcasm or resentment I expected, but his expression seemed genuine, if still processing the shock. "Thank you," I replied simply. The elevator doors opened to reveal hundreds of employees gathered in the atrium, waiting to hear about their company's future. As we walked toward the stage, I noticed Michael hesitate. "What happens now?" he asked under his breath. "Now," I replied. "Now we build something better than either of us could have built alone." Whether he would be part of that future remained to be seen. But as we took our places on the stage and John stepped up to the microphone, I felt a weight lifting. The degree that Michael had dismissed had given me exactly what I needed. Not just knowledge, but a framework for thinking about problems that others couldn't solve. And in the end, that had made all the difference. John's voice boomed through the atrium as he announced the acquisition. "Today marks a pivotal moment for Calypso Corp. By bringing EthiTech into our family, we're not just acquiring technology, We're integrating ethics into the very foundation of our business. I watched the crowd from my position on stage, conscious of Michael standing 3 people away, his posture rigid. Employees shifted in their seats, some nodding with approval, others showing the wariness that always accompanies corporate change announcements. To lead us through this transformation, John continued, I'm thrilled to introduce Sarah Wilson, founder and CEO of Ethitech, who will head our new ethical technology division. He gestured toward me with obvious respect. Sarah's vision of integrating philosophical principles into technological innovation represents exactly where our industry needs to go. As I stepped to the microphone, I caught my brother's eye. The shock had faded, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. I took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. Thank you, John. I'm excited to join the Calypso Corp team and to work with all of you. I spoke about our shared vision for the future, about building technology that served humanity rather than exploiting it, about the competitive advantage of doing the right thing in a world where consumers increasingly demanded ethical practices. I didn't mention my brother or our history. This moment wasn't about him or even about me. It was about the work, the reason I'd started Ethitech in the first place. After the announcement, employees lined up to introduce themselves. I shook hands, exchanged business cards, and tried to remember names and faces. From the corner of my eye, I saw Michael standing alone near the refreshment table, watching me. When the crowd finally thinned, he approached. Quite a speech, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Thanks, I replied. I've had a lot of practice pitching to skeptical audiences. I can imagine. He swirled the coffee in his cup. So what happens to my division now? I met his gaze directly. That depends on the results of our integration assessment. We'll be evaluating all financial algorithms for potential bias, ethical vulnerabilities, and compliance with our new framework. And if we don't measure up, the question hung between us. Then changes will be necessary. I kept my voice matter of fact. But Michael, this isn't about you and me. This is about building better systems. He nodded slowly. You realize people will talk. The Wilson siblings, one acquiring the other's company. It'll make for interesting office gossip. Let them talk. I shrugged. Our work will speak for itself. Before he could respond, John appeared at my elbow. Sarah, there's someone I'd like you to meet. He nodded politely to Michael before guiding me away. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and introductions. I didn't see Michael again until late afternoon, when I stepped into the elevator and found him already inside, alone. As the doors closed, he leaned against the wall. Remember when we were kids and played office in the basement? You always wanted to be the boss. Despite myself, I smiled at the memory. You always said girls couldn't be bosses. I was an idiot kid. He paused. I've been an idiot adult too, apparently. The elevator stopped at his floor. As he stepped out, he turned back. Dinner sometime this week? Just you and me. There's a lot to discuss. I hesitated, then nodded. Text me. The doors closed between us, and I leaned back against the elevator wall, suddenly exhausted. The victory I'd anticipated for so long felt different than expected. More complicated, less triumphant. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something far more challenging. 2 days later, we sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant several blocks from the office. The awkwardness between us felt both familiar and strange. A childhood dynamic, now playing out in adult bodies, with real consequences at stake. So, Michael said after we'd ordered, how long have you been planning this corporate coup? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think happened? A coup? He shrugged. What would you call it? Business. We built something valuable. Calypso Corp recognized that value. The fact that they had already acquired your division was coincidental. I took a sip of water, though I won't deny the timing was satisfying. A flicker of the old Michael surfaced. You enjoyed watching me squirm, didn't you? At the announcement. A little, I admitted. After years of hearing about my worthless degree, it felt like justice. Justice. He repeated the word thoughtfully. I suppose I deserve that. He leaned forward. But Sarah, you have to understand, I never thought you would fail. I just worried about you. Philosophy? Ethics? In this cutthroat world, I thought you were setting yourself up for disappointment. I studied his face, searching for sincerity. That's a convenient reframing. It's the truth. He met my gaze steadily. You're my little sister. I've always wanted to protect you, even if I've had a terrible way of showing it. By belittling my choices, by laughing at my company. The old hurt rose up unexpectedly. That's not protection, Michael. That's control. He flinched visibly. Maybe you're right. He stared down at his plate. Success has always been simple to me. Numbers go up, you're winning. Numbers go down, you're losing. What you've built, it's more complex than that. Yes, it is. The server appeared with our meals, providing a moment to collect my thoughts. We're trying to change how companies think about technology, to build systems that reflect human values, not just maximize profit. And now you want to apply those principles to my division. It wasn't a question. Your trading algorithms affect people's lives, I said quietly. When they fail, ethically, not just technically, real people suffer. We've seen it happen over and over in this industry. He cut into his steak with more force than necessary. So you're here to fix us broken finance people? To show us the error of our ways with your superior ethical framework? This isn't personal, Michael. Like hell it isn't. Some of his composure slipped. You couldn't have given me a heads up? A little warning that my little sister was about to become my boss. Would you have done that for me? I challenged. If our positions were reversed? Or would you have enjoyed the moment of triumph? He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. After a moment, he sighed. Fair point. I wouldn't have warned you either. The honesty surprised me. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the background noise of the restaurant filling the space between us. Finally, Michael spoke again. So what happens now? Are you going to fire me? I set down my fork. That depends on you. Our assessment starts next week. If your algorithms stand up to ethical scrutiny, if you're willing to implement the changes we recommend, then no. You keep your job. And if they don't measure up? I held his gaze. Then yes, changes in leadership would be necessary. Just like that. After 20 years in this industry, I could be out because my trading software doesn't meet your ethical standards. 20 years in an industry that crashed the global economy, that has repeatedly exploited regulatory loopholes, that has prioritized profit over people at every turn. I countered. The world is changing, Michael. Companies that don't adapt will be left behind. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with new eyes. You really believe all this, don't you? It's not just business for you. It never has been. That's what you never understood about my degree, about my company. I wasn't just building a product. I was trying to build a better way forward. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Mom and Dad know about all this yet? I shook my head. I was thinking we could tell them together. Maybe dinner this weekend. So they can watch their children try not to kill each other over tiramisu? Sounds entertaining. But his tone had lightened, and I could see him trying to adjust to our new reality. I'd like us to find a way to work together, I said carefully. But I need to know you're on board with what we're trying to accomplish. He was quiet for a long moment. I've spent my career playing by one set of rules. You're asking me to learn a completely different game. I'm asking you to play a better game, one with more complex measures of success than just quarterly profits. And if I can't or won't, then you'll need to find a company that still operates by the old rule book. There are plenty left. I softened my tone. But they're dinosaurs, Michael. They just don't know the meteor is coming. He picked up his wine glass, swirling the liquid thoughtfully. You always were the smartest one in the family. Even Dad said so. Dad never said that to me. No, he wouldn't. Michael smiled slightly. He told me, though, after you launched Ethitech, he said you saw things the rest of us missed. Something tight in my chest loosened at his words. I didn't know that. There's a lot we don't know about each other, it seems. He raised his glass. To finding out. I hesitated, then lifted my own glass to meet his. To finding out. The following Monday, I arrived at the office early to prepare for the first assessment meeting with Michael's team. Aisha joined me in my new corner office, which still felt strange and oversized after our startup's modest headquarters. Nervous about facing the brother? She asked, handing me a stack of reports. Not nervous, just cautious. We've had one civil dinner, but that doesn't erase decades of competition. You know, we could assign someone else to lead his division's assessment, she suggested. Avoid any appearance of conflict. I shook my head. We need to face this directly. Everything by the book, completely transparent. I won't give anyone reason to claim favoritism or vendetta. Fair enough. She glanced at her tablet. They're waiting in conference room A, full team as requested. I gathered my materials and headed down the hall, feeling the weight of all that hung in the balance. This wasn't just about Michael's career or my vindication. This was about whether our vision could actually transform a company from within, starting with one of its most profitable and potentially problematic divisions. I pushed open the conference room door to find 15 people seated around the table, Michael at the far end. He nodded professionally as I entered. Good morning, everyone, I began, taking my place at the head of the table. I appreciate you all being here. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll be conducting a comprehensive assessment of your division's algorithms and decision-making processes. A man to Michael's right, Graham, I recalled from the org chart, leaned forward with a skeptical expression. With all due respect, Ms. Wilson, our systems have passed every regulatory requirement and internal audit for the past 5 years. What exactly are you looking for that these other assessments missed? Excellent question. I opened my laptop. Traditional audits focus on technical performance and regulatory compliance. Our assessment evaluates potential for algorithmic bias, ethical vulnerabilities, and long-term societal impact. I glanced around the table. We're asking questions most companies haven't had to answer before. Questions like what? Graham pressed, his tone bordering on dismissive. Like whether your lending algorithms disadvantage certain demographic groups, not through explicit design, but through proxy variables. Like whether your automated trading systems could contribute to market instability under stress conditions. Like whether the data you use respects both the letter and spirit of privacy laws. Michael cleared his throat. These are legitimate concerns, Graham. The landscape is changing. Companies that get ahead of these issues will have a competitive advantage. I tried to hide my surprise at his support. Graham looked from Michael to me, clearly trying to understand the dynamics at play. We'll need full access to your code base, training data, and decision flows, I continued. My team will work closely with your engineers throughout the process. Another team member spoke up. And if you find something you don't like, then we work together to fix it, I replied. This isn't about assigning blame. It's about building better systems. The meeting continued for another hour as we outlined the assessment process. Michael remained mostly silent, though I noticed him watching me attentively. When we finally adjourned, he asked me to stay behind. As the room emptied, he closed the door. You handled Graham well. He's been with the company 15 years and thinks he knows everything. Thanks for backing me up, I said. I didn't expect that. He shrugged. I've been doing some reading since our dinner about algorithmic bias, about ethical AI. You might be onto something. I raised an eyebrow. Careful, Michael. That almost sounds like an admission that my philosophy degree might have value. He laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. Let's not get carried away, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. His expression grew more serious. Some of my team are scared, Sarah. They've built their careers on systems that you're now questioning. Change is always frightening, I acknowledged, but it's also necessary. The companies that adapt will survive. The others won't. So you keep saying. He studied me for a moment. I told the team about our relationship, by the way. Seemed better than letting them hear it through gossip. How did they take it? About like you'd expect. Shock, confusion, some amusement. He smiled wryly. Graham thinks I should be filing a discrimination complaint. The man loves drama. But most are taking a wait-and-see approach. And what about you? What's your approach? He was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to see this as an opportunity rather than a threat. Not easy for someone with my particular brand of ego, but I'm working on it. I felt a flicker of hope. That's surprisingly mature of you. Don't sound so shocked. He grinned. I do occasionally learn from my mistakes. Speaking of which, Mom called this morning. They've invited us both to dinner Saturday. Apparently Dad read about the acquisition online and they have questions. Lots of questions, I imagine. I checked my calendar. Saturday works. Should we present a united front? Might be less confusing for them. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. I've been meaning to ask. Why did you keep your connection to me quiet during the acquisition talks? You could have used it to your advantage, or at least given me a warning. I considered the question carefully, because I needed to know that Ethitech was being acquired on its own merits, not because of any family connection, and because I needed to prove to myself more than anyone that my path was valid. That my choices had value on their own terms, not in relation to yours. He nodded slowly. Always the philosopher, finding meaning in everything. That's what philosophers do, I replied. We don't just think about the world, we think about how to make it better. And that's what you're doing here, making the world better. Trying to, one algorithm at a time. He smiled, a hint of his old competitiveness returning. Well, let's see if my team's algorithms meet your lofty standards, Professor Wilson. Let's see, I agreed, returning his smile. The assessment process was more challenging than either of us anticipated. Michael's team initially approached our questions with defensive skepticism, but as they engaged with the issues we raised, many began to see the value in our framework. By the second week, we'd identified several significant concerns in their lending algorithms. Historical data had embedded patterns of discrimination that their models perpetuated, creating invisible barriers for certain applicants. When faced with the evidence, even Graham had to acknowledge the problem. But fixing this will impact our approval rates, he argued during one particularly tense meeting. Our profit margins are built on current acceptance patterns. Short-term thinking. Michael surprised me by responding before I could. If we're systematically excluding qualified customers based on flawed algorithms, we're leaving money on the table long-term. Not to mention setting ourselves up for potential lawsuits and regulatory penalties. I watched my brother with growing appreciation as he steered his team toward accepting necessary changes. He was still Michael. Ambitious, sometimes arrogant, always focused on results. But he was applying those qualities in a new direction, using his influence to bring his reluctant team along. The night before our final assessment report was due, I worked late in my office, organizing our findings and recommendations. A knock on my door revealed Michael holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting one on my desk. "You've been at it for 12 hours straight." "Thanks." I took a grateful sip, just finishing the executive summary for John. He glanced at my screen. "So what's the verdict?" Does my division survive your ethical inquisition? I gestured for him to sit. The algorithms need significant revision, especially the lending models and risk assessment tools. But the problems are fixable, and your team has shown they're capable of making the necessary changes. And leadership? I met his gaze directly. You've impressed me, Michael. I expected resistance, maybe sabotage. Instead, you've been constructive, even advocates for our approach with your team. Don't sound so surprised, he said, echoing our earlier conversation. I can recognize a good idea when I see one, even when it comes from my little sister with the philosophy degree. I laughed. A worthless philosophy degree, I believe you called it. He had the grace to look embarrassed. About that, I may have been slightly off in my assessment. Slightly. Fine. I was completely wrong. He leaned back in his chair. Your approach, thinking about systems holistically, considering their broader impacts, it's actually what the industry needs. I've been so focused on quarterly numbers that I missed the bigger picture. Are you feeling all right? This doesn't sound like the brother I know. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. He smiled. Or maybe people can change when presented with compelling evidence. Isn't that what your ethical framework is all about? Creating better systems by understanding their flaws. I studied him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful version of my brother with the dismissive man who had mocked my choices for years. What happens when the changes impact your bottom line? When shareholders question why profits are down because we're implementing more ethical standards? Then we make the business case for long-term thinking, for sustainability over quick wins. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. He stood up, stretching. The report looks good. Firm but fair. John will approve it. As he moved toward the door, I called after him. Michael? What changed? Really? He paused, considering the question. I've spent 20 years measuring success one way. When Calypso Corp acquired us, I assumed it would be more of the same, just with different letterhead. Then you walked into that meeting, and suddenly everything shifted. He shook his head, smiling ruefully. My little sister, who I'd written off as an idealistic dreamer, had built something valuable enough that a multi-billion-dollar company wanted it. Wanted her. It made me question every assumption I'd made about you, about business, about what matters. He met my gaze. You forced me to reconsider my definition of success, and I'm actually grateful for that. After he left, I sat in the quiet of my office, thinking about our journey from the Thanksgiving table where he'd laughed at my degree to this moment of unexpected understanding. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Michael was still Michael, with all his ambition and occasional arrogance. Our sibling rivalry hadn't magically disappeared. But something fundamental had shifted between us, a mutual respect that had never existed before. I finished the report and sent it to John, with copies to Michael and his leadership team. Then I packed up my things and headed home, mentally preparing for Saturday's dinner with our parents. When the weekend arrived, Michael and I found ourselves standing on our parents' doorstep together, almost like conspirators. Ready for this? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied as the door swung open to reveal our mother, her expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. Well, isn't this a surprise? She said, ushering us inside. My children arriving together without arguing. Should I be worried? Dad emerged from the living room, glasses perched on his nose. There they are, the tech moguls. His tone was light, but I could see the questions in his eyes. Over dinner, Michael and I took turns explaining the acquisition, our new working relationship, and the changes we were implementing. Our parents listened with growing amazement. So let me get this straight, Dad said finally. Your company acquired Michael's division, and now you're his boss. Not exactly his boss, I clarified. We have different reporting lines, but my team is setting the ethical standards that his division has to meet. And you're okay with this? Mom asked Michael directly. He glanced at me before answering. It's been educational. Sarah's built something important, something I didn't fully understand or appreciate before. He smiled wryly. Turns out that philosophy degree wasn't so worthless after all. Dad shook his head in amazement. I always knew you were smart, Sarah, but I never imagined this. Neither did I admitted. I just followed what felt meaningful to me, even when others, I glanced pointedly at Michael, thought I was wasting my time. Life is full of surprises, Mom said, looking between us with obvious pleasure at our newfound détente. And speaking of surprises, who's ready for dessert? Later, as Michael and I helped clear the dishes, he bumped my shoulder lightly. Not bad for a philosophy major, huh? Not bad at all, I agreed. Think we can actually make this work? The sibling business partnership. I considered the question seriously. I think we have complementary strengths. Your ambition and business savvy, my ethical framework and vision. Together, we might actually build something important. Emphasis on might, he said, but he was smiling. We'll probably still fight. Definitely, I laughed. But maybe now we're fighting for something, not just against each other. He nodded thoughtfully. I can work with that. As we rejoined our parents in the dining room, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond professional vindication or sibling rivalry. The philosophy degree that Michael had once mocked had led me to build something that was changing how one of the world's largest tech companies approached ethics and technology. But more importantly, it had finally helped bridge the gap between my brother and me. Not by proving him wrong, but by showing him a different way to be right. Dad raised his glass for a toast. To my brilliant children. Different paths, same destination. What destination is that? Michael asked. Dad smiled. Making a difference. Each in your own way. We clinked glasses, and for once there was no competition between us. Just the shared recognition that success comes in many forms, and sometimes the most valuable degrees are the ones that teach us how to think about what truly matters.